Imagine arriving somewhere new, where everyone already knows each other, where you're the only one who doesn't quite fit yet. And Shirley knows that feeling very well. A new place, new people, a whole world that still feels a little unfamiliar. And today, as Anne steps into another ordinary day in Avonlea, she's about to have a moment just like that. Hello, brave and beautiful girls, and welcome back to Girls Who Rise. Before we begin our story today, let's take a quiet moment together. If you'd like, place your hand gently over your heart. Take a slow breath in and breathe out. Again, slow breath in and out. I want you to remember that you matter. Your imagination matters. Your voice matters. This is a place for big feelings, brave hearts, and stories that help us grow. Today, we're stepping back into Anne's world again, a world where imagination can turn ordinary moments into something extraordinary, a world where people are still learning about each other, and a world where brave hearts sometimes have to try again after difficult moments. Before we begin, here is your gentle story note. Anne of Green Gables was written a long time ago, so sometimes the language might sound a little different than what we're used to. This retelling has been gently abridged for listening. That means the story has been shortened just a little so it flows more easily when we listen together. Nothing important has been removed. The heart of the story is still here. The beauty is still here. And most of all, this is still Anne's story. And now, get cozy, take another slow breath, and let's begin. Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. Chapter 11. Anne Goes to Sunday School. Sunday morning arrived bright and clear over Green Gables. Anne awoke earlier than usual. For a moment she lay quietly in her small room beneath the sloping roof, watching the morning sunlight slowly stretch across the floorboards. The events of the past few days drifted through her thoughts. Mrs. Rachel's sharp words, her own sudden temper, and then the apology she had finally gathered the courage to make. Anne did not enjoy remembering those moments, but she also knew she had learned something from them. Sometimes belonging meant choosing kindness even when it felt difficult. Anne turned her head toward the little window beside her bed. Outside, the fields looked peaceful in the soft morning light. A small breeze moved through the trees. The day felt calm, and Anne felt ready to start the day anew. She jumped out of bed and dressed quickly. When she came downstairs, Marilla was already moving about the kitchen preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Anne," Marilla said. "Good morning, Marilla," Anne replied cheerfully. Then she paused. "Is today the day we go to Sunday school?" "Yes, it is," Marilla answered. Anne's eyes brightened. "I've never been to Sunday school before," she said thoughtfully. "In fact, I've never even been to church at all." She paused for a moment and then said to herself, "I wonder what it will be like." "Well," Marilla said, setting a plate on the table, "you'll find out soon enough." Anne's eyes shone with curiosity. "I think it might be very interesting." "It's meant to be quiet and respectful," Marilla said. "Mostly people listen." Anne nodded seriously. "I'll pay very close attention," she said. "I wouldn't want to embarrass you." Marilla glanced at her. "Just sit quietly and you'll do fine." Matthew came in from the yard just then, brushing the dust from his sleeves. "Morning, Anne," he said quietly. "Good morning, Matthew," Anne replied brightly. Marilla glanced toward the clock. "It's getting late. We should be getting ready." Anne hurried to finish her breakfast. Before long, the three of them were ready to leave. Matthew led the way outside, and they started on the road together toward the church. Anne walked between them, looking around with great interest. She had never been to church before, but somehow the morning felt important, because Anne wanted very much to do everything right. The church building stood near the center of Avonlea. Anne walked beside Marilla along the road, her eyes moving everywhere. She noticed the tall trees, the small white fences, the quiet houses along the way. Everything still felt new, and Anne enjoyed noticing every detail. When they arrived, many people were already gathered outside the church. Anne slowed her steps. There were so many unfamiliar faces. Women speaking quietly together, men greeting each other near the steps, children standing in small groups. Anne felt a small flutter of nervousness inside her. This was a place where everyone seemed to know one another. and Anne was still very new. Marilla led her inside. The wooden benches filled the room in neat rows. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, lighting the quiet space. Anne sat beside Marilla and folded her hands carefully in her lap. She tried very hard to sit perfectly still, but her eyes wandered everywhere. She watched the other girls nearby, ribbons in their hair, the neat way they sat, the little glances they gave one another. Anne wondered what they thought of her. She wondered if any of them might someday become her friend. When the church service ended, the room filled with movement. People stood up from the wooden pews. The quiet room suddenly filled with small sounds, footsteps. Voices murmured softly as the children were gathered and guided toward their Sunday school classes. Anne followed along with the other girls to a smaller classroom. They settled themselves on benches with the comfortable ease of children who had done this many Sundays before. Anne held herself very still, hoping she looked like somebody who knew exactly how to behave in church. When the lesson began, she listened as carefully as she could. The teacher spoke of patience and kindness, and Anne liked the sound of those words. She thought they sounded like the sort of things a truly good person would have. Still, she found her thoughts wandering now and then. She wondered what it would feel like to belong here, to walk into a room and know everyone, to have someone wave at her and say hello. Anne had always believed that friendships were one of the most wonderful things in the world. But friendships, she knew, took time. When the lessons ended, the children gathered together in small groups. Anne stood quietly beside Marilla. She watched the other girls laughing softly together. She had hoped someone might speak to her, but no one did. Not yet. Anne reminded herself to be patient. Sometimes the best things in life arrived slowly. As they walked home after church, Anne felt thoughtful. Marilla, Anne said as they walked home. Yes, I believe Sunday school is a very interesting place. Is it? Yes, Anne said. There are so many people there, and every one of them seems to know exactly what they're doing. I felt as if I had arrived halfway through a story everyone else had already been reading for years. Marilla glanced at her. You'll learn soon enough. No worries. I hope so, Anne said earnestly, because there were so many girls there. I kept wondering which ones might be nice and which ones might think me very odd. Marilla was quiet for a moment. Well, she said at last, you will get to know them in time. Do you think, she asked carefully, that some of the girls might become my friends? I expect that they might. Anne let out a small, relieved breath. I hope so, she said quietly. I've never had very many friends before. Marilla did not answer right away, but she walked beside Anne a little more slowly as if she were thinking about that. Though Anne still felt new in Avonlea, the thought that she might someday have a friend there made the walk home feel a little less lonely. Chapter 12. A Solemn Vow and Promise. The afternoon after Sunday school was quiet at Green Gables. Anne sat at the table beside Marilla, carefully shelling peas into a bowl. She worked slowly, but her thoughts were moving quickly. The morning at church had given her much to think about. Finally, she spoke. Marilla. Yes, Anne? Do you think it takes a long time for people to begin liking someone new? Marilla continued her work for a moment and thought before answering. Yes, sometimes it does. Anne nodded thoughtfully. I suppose that makes sense, she said. When people already know each other very well, it must feel strange when someone new appears. Marilla glanced at her. That can happen. Anne dropped another pea into the bowl. I believe, she continued slowly, that if I'm patient and try to behave kindly, people may begin to like me eventually. Marilla allowed herself the smallest nod. That does seem reasonable. Anne brightened slightly. I'm glad you think so. She paused. Then her expression grew more serious again. I've been thinking about something else, too. I have made my mind up about something. Marilla raised an eyebrow. Have you? Yes. Anne spoke very carefully now. I have made up my mind that I will try very hard to behave properly. Marilla looked at Anne thoughtfully. Anne continued. I do not mean that I shall always succeed, she added honestly, but I believe I should try. Marilla set the dish down she was holding. Yes, trying is usually a very good place to begin. Anne nodded and spoke with quiet determination. I solemnly promise that I will try my very best to be patient, kind, and thoughtful. She paused, even when it feels difficult. For a moment, Marilla went on working without speaking. Then she said, Anne, that sounds like a very sensible promise. Anne smiled slightly. I do feel better after saying it out loud. Late in the afternoon, Anne wandered into the yard. The air smelled faintly of grass and warm earth. She walked slowly along the fence, thinking about the decision she had just made. Anne knew she wouldn't always get things right, but she did believe that trying mattered, and that trying was a good place to begin. The last light of the day stretched across the fields as evening settled over Green Gables. That evening, Matthew returned home from town. Anne ran out to meet him at the gate. Matthew, she called. Matthew smiled shyly. Well, now, he said, you seem cheerful today. I've decided something very important, Anne told him proudly. Matthew looked a little puzzled. Really? Yes. Anne explained her decision carefully. Matthew listened quietly. When she finished, he nodded slowly. Well, he said, that sounds like a good sort of promise. Anne beamed. I think so, too. Later, Anne sat by the window in her little room. The sky outside had turned a soft shade of gold fading into evening. Anne rested her chin in her hands. It had been a thoughtful sort of day. Sunday school, new people, new ideas, and now the decision she had made for herself. Anne did not know exactly what the future would bring, but she did know something. She wanted to keep trying, and somehow that made Anne feel a little braver about tomorrow. Chapter 13, Waiting for Something Wonderful. The next morning at Green Gables began quietly. Anne woke to the gentle sounds of the birds outside her window. The sky was bright, and the early sunlight filled her small room with a golden glow. Anne opened her eyes, sat up in bed, and listened. The farmyard outside was just beginning to stir. Anne stretched. She was thinking about the promise she had made to herself the day before, to be patient, to be kind, to try her best. Anne believed that trying was very important indeed. She pulled on her clothes and hurried downstairs. Marilla was in the kitchen, moving briskly about. Good morning, Anne, she said. Good morning, Marilla, Anne replied brightly. Anne took her place at the table and began helping with the breakfast preparations. For a few moments she worked quietly. Then she spoke again. Marilla? Yes? Do you think it is possible to become friends with someone quickly? Marilla glanced at her. It could happen. Anne thought about that for a moment. I think that would be nice. Later that morning, Marilla told Anne they would be visiting a nearby neighbor. The Barrys lived just down the road, Marilla explained. They have a daughter just about your age. Her name is Diana. Anne's eyes widened with interest. Diana, she repeated softly. That's a very pretty name. Anne felt a sudden flutter of excitement. She's my age? Yes. Marilla, she said eagerly, do you think she might become my friend? Marilla's lips curved into the faintest smile. It depends on whether the two of you will get along. Anne thought about this for a moment. Well, she said slowly, I think I'll be imagining what she's like until we get there. Marilla gave her a small look. We'll be there soon enough. Anne nodded. I know, she said, but it's nice to imagine what she might be like. Anne spent the rest of the morning thinking about Diana Barry. She wondered what Diana would look like. She wondered whether Diana liked stories. She wondered if Diana enjoyed walking in the woods or imagining wonderful adventures. Anne imagined dozens of possible conversations. Perhaps Diana would say something friendly right away. Maybe they would laugh together, and maybe they might become the best of friends. Anne felt her excitement growing. I think, she said aloud when she brushed her hair, that imagining what she might be like is almost as fun as meeting her. When Anne and Marilla finally began walking toward the Barry house, Anne could hardly contain her curiosity. The road stretched ahead of them through the peaceful Avonlea countryside. Even though that road was becoming familiar, Anne still looked eagerly at everything they passed, the tall grasses moving in the breeze, the sunlight shining through the leaves of the trees, and the quiet houses standing beside the road. To Anne, all of it seemed bright and interesting, and she didn't want to miss a single thing. But most of all, Anne noticed the feeling inside her chest: anticipation, a hopeful kind of excitement that something interesting might be about to happen. Marilla, Anne said after a moment. Yes. Do you think Diana Barry will like me? Marilla answered calmly. I don't see why she wouldn't. Anne nodded. I hope she does, she whispered to herself. The thought of having a real friend made her feel both excited and a little nervous all at once. They walked further. Then Anne said, I hope she likes imagining adventures. Marilla smiled a small smile, and there was a gentle look in her eyes. When they reached the Barry house, Anne stood very nervous beside Marilla. Her heart beat a little faster, and her mouth felt dry. Marilla knocked on the door. A moment later, the door opened, and a girl stepped out onto the porch. She had dark hair that hung in smooth braids and bright eyes that looked at Anne with quiet curiosity. Behind her stood the Barry house, neat and welcoming, with a small garden beside the steps and tall trees shading the yard. Good morning, Diana, Marilla said. Good morning, Mrs. Cuthbert, Diana replied politely. Is your mother home today? Marilla asked. She is, Diana said. She's inside. Marilla nodded and then turned to Anne. This is Anne Shirley. She has come to live with us at Green Gables. For a moment, the two girls simply looked at each other. Well, Marilla said, I will go in and speak with your mother for a few minutes. You girls may stay here and get acquainted. With that, Marilla stepped into the house. Anne smiled warmly. Hello, Diana, she said. Diana smiled back. Hello. For a moment, they stood quietly looking at one another. Then Diana stepped down from the porch. Would you like to see the garden? She asked. Anne's face brightened. The two girls walked slowly along the path, stopping to look at flowers growing beside the house. They spoke a little, and sometimes they simply looked at things together. And in that small, simple moment, Anne felt something wonderful. Possibility. Perhaps this might be the beginning of a friendship. Before long, Marilla came back outside. It had only been a short visit, but as Anne walked away, she kept thinking about Diana and wondering what it might be like the next time they met. The thought stayed with her all the way down the road. Marilla, Anne asked. Yes? I believe that thinking about something before it happens might be one of the happiest feelings a person can have. Marilla looked at her. Really? Yes, Anne nodded. Because when you're thinking about something you're looking forward to, it feels as though anything might happen. Marilla considered this. Well, perhaps you're right. Anne smiled quietly, and she walked home feeling very hopeful. This was the very beginning of something new for Anne. Well, girls, what did you think about what you just listened to? That felt like a really important part of the story to me. Anne was trying so hard to understand a new place, and she was hoping she might find a friend. And even though nothing big happened, it still felt like something was beginning. Didn't you feel that way too? Let's take a moment and look what happened in these chapters. And while I'm talking, I want you to think about how you're feeling. First, Anne experienced her very first Sunday in Avonlea. Everything about the morning was new to her. She had never been to church before, and she was trying very hard to understand how things worked. She watched the people around her, she listened carefully, and she paid attention to how everyone behaved so she could do the same. Have you ever been somewhere for the first time where you didn't know quite what to do? Maybe a new classroom, a new activity, or a place where everyone else seemed to understand the rules? What did you do? Did you watch people around you, or did you just sit quietly and hoped that you could figure things out yourself? One thing we might notice is how carefully Anne observes things. She wants to do well. She very much wants to fit into her new life at Green Gables, and she wants to belong. Next, Anne made an important decision for herself. She thought carefully about the kind of person she wanted to be. She decided she wanted to try very hard to do the right things, not because someone forced her, but because she wanted to make good choices. Have you ever made a decision like that? Maybe you decided you were going to try harder at something, or be kinder, or be brave about something new. Another thing we might notice is how thoughtful Anne can be. We can see she doesn't always get everything right, but she thinks deeply about the kind of person she wants to become. When Anne learned she would be meeting a girl named Diana Barry, she immediately began imagining what Diana might be like. Would she be kind? Would they laugh together? Could they become friends? We have all wondered what someone might be like before meeting them. Maybe a new classmate, a teammate, or someone you are about to meet for the first time. I'm wondering, what kinds of things do you imagine? When Anne finally met Diana, the visit was short, but something important happened. The two girls liked each other. And sometimes that's all it takes for the beginning of a friendship. I noticed how much Anne hopes for a friend, and I wondered, why does she feel that way? I think it's because she has spent a long time feeling alone, so meeting someone her own age feels special. And as we keep reading, we are starting to get to know the characters a little bit more. We begin to notice something important about how people experience feelings. Because when feelings have names, they are not quite so scary. Those big feelings are nervousness, anticipation, determination. Nervousness is the feeling we sometimes get when we enter a new place or face something unfamiliar. Anne felt nervous when she arrived at Sunday school and saw so many unfamiliar faces. She didn't know quite what to expect. She wanted very much to do the right thing, and we've all felt nervous about a place where everything felt new. Maybe it was the first day of school, or a new activity where you didn't know anyone yet. Anticipation is the feeling of excited curiosity about something that might happen. Anne felt anticipation when she learned she would be meeting Diana Barry. On the walk to the Barry house, her mind filled with possibilities. What would Diana be like? Would she be kind? Could they become friends? Anticipation can make our thoughts feel busy with possibilities. Determination is the feeling that helps us decide to keep trying. And Anne showed determination when she made up her mind that she wanted to do the right things. She knew that she might not get everything right at first, but she wanted to try. Sometimes determination is quiet. It's simply the moment we decide that something matters to us. And while Anne was feeling all of these things, Matthew and Marilla may have been feeling things too. Matthew may have felt hopeful. He cared about Anne very much and wanted her to feel comfortable and happy. Marilla may have been watching carefully, wondering how Anne would manage in a new place. Marilla doesn't always say much about her feelings, but sometimes we can see them in the way that she watches and listens. She doesn't give in to emotion much. Anne is different. She shares her feelings as soon as she has them because she's used to spending a lot of time alone and thinking on her own. And Matthew is quieter still. He doesn't say much because he's more comfortable showing how he feels in the small things he does. All of this is happening all at once. Anne is beginning to feel something new. She is seeing new possibilities, and sometimes that feeling reminds us that wonderful things still may be waiting ahead. And sometimes that feeling reminds us that wonderful things may still be waiting ahead. But even happy, excited feelings can feel big inside. And when feelings feel big, it helps to slow down. You can take a breath. You can quiet the busy thoughts in your mind. And when you listen carefully, you may begin to notice the steady voice that's inside of you. That voice helps you choose kindness. That voice reminds you that you can keep trying, especially when you're experiencing something new. You are learning to trust yourself, and that takes patience, practice, and time. I had such a good time reading to you today. As we wind down, let's take a slow breath in and a gentle breath out. I want to remind you that you are not too much. You are exactly as you are meant to be. There is a place for you here. You matter. Until next time, be gentle with your heart. Keep noticing your thoughts and feelings, and remember that being hopeful, curious, and a little unsure is a part of being brave. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this podcast so you don't miss when I post a new chapter. I can't wait to keep reading with you and see where Anne's journey takes us next. Until next time, brave hearts, see you soon.